Welcome back to the Catapult Effect podcast. I am your host, Katie Wrigley. Thank you so much for tuning into this show. I know you have so many choices of how you spend your time and what you're listening to and watching on the internet. And I truly appreciate you taking time to tune into this show and gather whatever seeds you can take into your life to help improve your wellness, calm your nervous system, and help yourself move towards those goals you're working on. Thank you sincerely. This episode is a little different from what I normally do, so I wanted to do an intro a little differently as well. I interviewed an amazing guest for this week's episode, Jen Johnson. She's an ER nurse, and she was an ER nurse on the front lines during COVID. And she's taken that time, which she shares about openly and vulnerably in this episode. And she's taken what she learned in that time, and she has created a book. And I want you to listen to this episode with an open mind and open heart, and no matter what profession you're in, whether you are a first responder, whether you are a professional who's highly stressed, whatever you may be doing, Jen is popping in gems of wisdom that can apply to you no matter what your role is in life, in work, in school, in love, wherever you may be. She has some amazing insight to share. So I hope you enjoy the episode. Thank you again.
Welcome to the Catapult Effect, a podcast where professionals like you turn challenges into opportunities for extraordinary growth. If you're tired of struggling, feeling lost, and ready to catapult yourself into the best version of you, then you're in the right place. Here's your host, Katie Wrigley.
Welcome back to the Catapult Effect podcast. I am your host, Katie Wrigley, and I have another amazing guest with me here this week, Jennifer Johnson. She is a wife, mother of two, and a registered nurse in Ontario, Canada. She has spent the last 16 years of her career in the ER of big and small hospitals all over Northern and Southern Ontario. She has personally been a part of all the heartbreak, drama, bullying, life-to-death moments, and then also trying to cope with the ER during a global pandemic. Her debut model, Nursing Intuition, How to Trust Your Gut, Save Your Sanity, and Survive Your Career, launches on October 29th, and it is her rally cry to all the other nurses struggling through this pandemic and finding that they're losing their love of nursing. Thank you so much for being here today, Jen. Welcome to the Catapult Effect.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited. Thank you very much for having me.
I really wanted to have this conversation because we've got nurses leaving the profession in droves, which is a problem on so many levels. And I also consider ER workers to be part of first responders because you guys you're picking up the stuff that they're picking up on the street. It's not any easier for you guys than it is for them. Maybe you aren't in as much danger as they are, but you still are, your psyche is going through things that the human psyche is not meant to go through on a daily basis, and it's going to take a toll.
Yeah, it's a lot. And even just trying to come at it where, nurses are frontline responders too, we try. Could I be a paramedic? Absolutely not.
Same.
I do enjoy when they bring the chaos into my domain and I know exactly where everything is and have got a fairly safe idea as to what is where and who is where and whatever else. I know where the exits are, kind of thing. But yeah, we do. Those that make it to us sometimes don't make it past us. So It's still very traumatic. Absolutely, is it every day? No, thankfully. But the days that hit hard, they truly hit hard.
Yeah, I can just imagine. Thank you so much for being a nurse, being in the profession, and staying with it for as long as you have, especially considering the toll the pandemic took. So I understand both from your bio and from our interactions before this interview that COVID actually sparked some creativity in you, and that is what led you to create this book that is coming out at the end of next month. So can you share a little bit about what was happening there that led to the inspiration that's going to be this book?
Yeah, so when everything shut down in March of 2020, my children were 4 and 5, 4.5, 5.5. And, it was just going to be a week. Then it was just going to be 2. Then it was just going to be a month. And then it was just going to be 2. And it just kept kind of dragging on. And when things first really were bad, when everything first shut down and everybody was super scared and the fear was at an all-time high, we lots of people volunteered for services for us. Lots of people brought in food and they banged the pots up this way and all the great things. And the other great thing was, we had attorneys offering to do our wills for free.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Ooh, I just got
Yeah.
chills.
Yeah. So if we weren't already kind of thinking about the message that we weren't going to survive this, that really kind of, not that it wasn't necessary. Absolutely. Everybody should have a will in place and everything organized, especially with children in the mix. And thankfully we already were okay that way, but it was just like, so the expectations I'm going to die. Wow. Okay. That's something else. Okay. So you're kind of leaning with that. You're scared. You don't know. And again, the ER, we don't know who's positive. Like it's, they're still trying to get the tests going. They're still trying to figure out what's happening. Tests are taking like 2 days to come back. And so people who were potentially positive or positive, they sat in the ER until those test results came back, and then they'd move out of the ER. Even though there could have been beds on the floor, they wouldn't move out of the ER until we had that negative. And then for a long time, if they were positive, they would actually go out to a sister site where they had dedicated COVID units. So it was with that. And then, we had no daycare. My parents weren't able to come down. My husband's mother wasn't able to come down, and nor did we kind of want them to either. We didn't want to put them at risk. But then there's no school and there's no daycare. And my husband's also a frontline worker. So it was like, okay, so how do we go from, I guess I'm working straight nights, which fine. Most of my career has been straight nights. It's not a big adjustment, but it was like staying up all day with the kids, getting no nap before going to my first shift, staying up all night, potentially. Thankfully, with everybody not coming in, we actually got like half decent naps, like 2 to 3 hours sometimes. So to have a nap at work, come home, stay up all day, nap when my husband come home, and then go back and just the cycle. And so by the time middle of August or middle of April rolled around, I was completely out of my mind. I shouldn't have been nursing. I should not have been caring for others because I was in no place to even care for myself. So it was that kind of hitting rock bottom. Drinking kind of took an uptick, scared, eating like crazy because I'm like, if I'm going to die, I'm just going to eat, 6 bags of these Snyder's, like kettle corn type of like pretzel bites that I'd never found before. I'm like, these are amazing. I'm just going to keep eating everything.
Comfort food, yeah.
Comfort food. And it was like, well, what does it matter? Because like I may not survive. So let's just, lean hard into that. And so leaning into it, and the more time passed, the more it was like, okay, well, if I die and I've got the 4 and 5-year-old at home, how do we explain to them that I chose to continue to go to work? Like, how does one potentially try and decrease that trauma that they're going to have later in life?
Right.
So the idea was like, okay, maybe if I write down all of my really, really good stories about people that I'd helped and situations that I was in and things that went well, maybe that would help and kind of explain a little bit as to why I kept going in. But of course, with the good, the bad, those stories stick way harder than the good ones. So for every good story, I had about 5 bad stories. So, and then it was this cathartic thing where I just started writing, and the stories came out, and the more I sat in these stories, I finally was feeling like I could work through them. Not that I was in any place mentally to work through them, but I was just going with it. And so, looking at these stories and going back and kind of going through like all the bullying situations and all this other garbage, and you're just like, here's this like thread that's like just weaving through the stories of intuition. And I hadn't really noticed it before. And sure enough, Llewellyn, who's a book publisher in the US, who's, esoteric and tarot and intuition and all these great, kind of woo-woo topics, they were having online book fairs. And so they'd get their authors to come on and talk about the books. And one of the authors was talking about her book, Intuition at Work. And it was listening to that where I'm like, I use that every day. I'm like, whoa, okay. Let's take a step back. Let's kind of look at the stories. And sure enough, here's this little thread of intuition that's working through all these stories. And I'm going, okay, well, I get that. I understand that. but I can't exactly bring that out without having some science behind me, because being in the medical field, we are very much science driven, and rightfully so. But, on a lark, I'm like, I wonder if there's any chance of like any science around intuition. Maybe it's just psychology, maybe it's, a couple of things here and there, but like, let's just see. So not only was there a ton of information on intuition, like 20 years, 30 years worth of scientific evidence-based things in intuition, there was also a ton on specifically intuition and nursing. So I'm like, okay, if that's the science, that's the science. Let's go. And so then kind of piecing it together and, explaining intuition and how to trust your gut and what does it feel like, and how do you then bring that feeling forward to other medical people who you want to potentially look at your patient and say like, hey, I don't have a great feeling about this. How do you explain that to somebody who you may or may not know if they're kind of okay with this idea of trusting your gut? So, going through the science and weaving my stories, and it just kind of, so it wrote itself. It was 6 weeks. I do not remember writing it.
Wow. I've heard of that happening. Yeah.
I was like, okay, like I do remember staying up really, really late. I do remember waking up really, really early and like voice dictating occasionally and like going back and forth through the stories a couple of different times to try and tweeze out the story. So it actually is more than just a 2-minute kind of quick, story that we throw at each other as nurses. And then I was like, okay, like, all right, so this is a book. What am I going to do now? So I'm like, okay, well, let's try. Let's send this off to publishers. And so was accepted to a traditional publisher, and waited 2 years. And unfortunately, just I think this past May, June, they decided that they were actually going to go back to kind of their physiotherapy book roots and not publish it. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. I mean, I should have seen it coming. They gave me multiple options, like multiple times where I could have gotten out, where they're like, if you want to take this out to somebody else, or if you want to do it yourself, like, just let us know and that's cool. And I'm like, no, you said yes, the contract's signed, it's yours. So it's like, okay, well, now that it's back to mine, I didn't realize that I missed it until it was back in my kind of, the property rights were back into my hands. And I'm like, oh, I didn't realize I missed those.
Wow.
And then it's like, well, it's been 2 years. I'm not waiting. I'm not applying to another publisher to chance it that this is going to happen again. I had applied to a multitude of publishers originally, and it was all no's except for that one. So I'm like, you know what? We're just going to do this ourselves. Like, that's just it. The Gritty Nurse podcast had just put out The Wisdom of Nurses, that just came out in April this year at Times New York bestseller, and it was, traditionally published. Like, there's movement on the nursing stories kind of end of things. So I'm like, okay, why don't I just do this myself? That's just the way we're going to go. So then all of a sudden having to come up with the cash to pay an editor and a different editor and a cover designer and, PR people and all these things. And it's just like, oh man, that's, so, roughly 10K American to publish a book. If you're doing it yourself and you want it done well, it's roughly 10K. So I'm like, okay, well, yeah, it's not cheap. Watch out for vanity publishers, those who like chase you to be like, oh, we want to publish your book, da, 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 but you're still paying them is kind of ridiculous. So just be very careful. There's a lot of scams in regards to books and hybrid publishers versus vanity publishers. There's a lot going on there.
Yeah.
But it's like, you know what? It's an investment. It's mine. If we're going to do this, we're going to do it right. So let's just go. We'll put it on the line of credit. We'll pick up some agency shifts. We will fund it that way and we'll go from there. And so, yeah, here we are. It's, T minus like not even 6 weeks, and I'm losing my mind with like, oh my God, like getting everything teed up and ready to go. And it's like, I've been telling people for 2 years that it's coming. And then finally I'm like, I have a date. It's here. Like, you can order it on Amazon, like pre-order. Oh my God. Like, it's nuts.
So exciting. I want to pause there because you touched on a few things that I really want to go back to kind of draw out a lot of what was happening under the layers. So
yeah,
you had mentioned the lawyers coming in and, oh, we'll do your wills for free.
Mm-hmm.
So there's so much science around hope. And so
Yes.
I do a lot of work
Yes.
in the Heroic app. Yeah. And have you heard of, I think it was, I don't remember if his first name was John, but Stockdale, who was a POW in Vietnam.
Hmm.
So they call it the Stockdale paradox. And I don't want to muck it all up and try to go into that, but basically but just his story in a nutshell, his plane gets shot down. He's
Hmm.
able to evacuate, lands with a parachute in the middle of this little town, has enough time to be like, okay, there's no way for me to hide. There's no way for me to get out of this. They're going to capture me. And it's going to be years before I get out of here.
Yeah.
And he looked at the reality of the situation. And he was in there. I think he figured it was going to be at least 5 years. I think he may have been in for 7.
Oh,
But the amazing thing was, other people who were other prisoners of war, they kept thinking they were going to get out at Christmas or Easter or
yeah.
Thanksgiving or their birthday. And then they didn't, and they died
Yeah.
because they lost hope.
Hmm.
Because Stockdale said, all right, I'm in this for the long haul. He knew, he was then planting a seed in his mind saying, okay, someone is going to rescue me someday. It's not going to be today. It's not going to be this year. But
Yeah.
he had that hope of a future rescue. And that is what kept him going when other prisoners of war died, because they lost that hope. So
Hmm.
those lawyers doing that, even though they were probably just trying to be helpful, they
Yes.
were getting rid of that hope. When you are already getting bombarded with fear, you're hearing raw human emotion every day when people are losing people. We weren't
Yeah.
allowed to see our loved ones even as they were
No.
dying of COVID. So then you've got the horror of watching someone die alone, separate from their loved ones. You've
Yeah.
got their loved ones that are gutted because their person is dying.
Hmm.
It's fucking horrible. It's just
It was not good.
it really, and I want to emphasize this so people understand, because everybody got impacted by COVID. There's not one human being on earth who was alive in 2020 who was
Yeah.
not affected by this virus in some way, shape, or form. Some people way more than others, but
Yep.
everybody got hit by it really bad. And understanding part of why it hit us so hard is really important to helping to repair that damage and coming out of it. And hope
Hmm.
was a huge piece of that. And then the other thing you said is it was so much easier to remember the bad stories than the good. That's your nervous system.
Yeah.
So our nervous systems, our brains, your nervous system is there to protect you, right? And your subconscious mind, the whole thing that it wants to do is keep you safe and alive. No big deal. Just keeping you safe and alive. That's
Just an
all it's
everyday. It's fine.
about. Right. So it's going to do whatever it needs to do. It doesn't care about logic, doesn't care about reason, definitely doesn't care if it's being rational or not. It just wants to keep
Yes.
your butt alive.
Yes.
And so it's going to, hey, do you remember this bad thing that happened? It's right here.
It's
And it's
here.
not gonna, right. And the good stories, like, oh, well, the good story is safe, but did you remember this time?
Hmm.
Stay in the bad story. This keeps us safe. And it's not true that staying in the bad keeps us safe, but that's how the nervous system is wired. So being able
Yeah.
to unwire that and intentionally look and say, all right, today was a shit day, but hey, this really great thing happened. Let me
Yeah.
just spend a moment in that energy and let yourself feel that energy of, okay, this actually had a good ending. I'm going to glom onto this one because my body feels so much better holding on to this good news right now than all the other crap I had to go through today.
Yeah.
But we're hardwired that way, Jen. And so we will, it's not you being negative. That is the way your brain is wired to keep you safe. And with what you're saying, your stress is super high. Like I almost wanted to make a smart ass comment of like, oh, so COVID was stress free for you, right? Changing
Right?
everything in
It was so
your life,
it was
just like it was
so
for me.
easy. It was just like a
Right.
walk in the park. It was no big deal.
Actual physical stress that working nights does to the body because you're going against the normal circadian rhythm. So you've got extra psychological stress from the pandemic. You've got the physiological, and then you have the stress that comes with shift work.
Yep.
And then you've got lawyers being like, hey, by the way, just in case you die, I got your back.
It's fine. It's fine. It's all fine. Just don't worry about it.
All of those factors are going to be playing back in the subconscious mind on anything that you're working with. And that's normal to go
Yeah.
through that. And so I want to shift over and go directly into, I'd really love to hear, like, I understand it, but I don't even know if I could explain it. But what is the science behind intuition? What exactly is our intuition and what you have seen from the science-based research you've done, Jen?
Yeah. So, I mean, the easiest way to explain it is any woman over the age of 12 knows exactly what intuition feels like. You
Yeah.
walk into the bar, you walk into a room, you walk across from somebody, and you're just like, ugh, creep factor. Like, just an immediate visceral response without
Hmm.
you thinking about it, without you initiating it. It just happens.
Hmm.
And when we're in the scenarios where we're alone and are by ourselves, we're walking, we're, doing the things, we're ultra aware of our surroundings. Again, just as a survival response. Um, so it's one of those things where that's the feeling that when you bring that into nursing, you're triaging a patient, things are looking okay. The story's not bad. It's not great, but it's not bad. The vitals are all right. But there's something about them. And you can't put your finger on it, and your gut, you get that heavy pit in your gut. You just go, I don't like this. Like, I don't like what's happening. And so you end up, either brushing it off. Oh, it's nothing. I'm just being silly. Like, I'm being overprotective, or I'm too new, or whatever else. Or it's okay. Something's wrong. I don't know what it is, but I'm still going to follow it. I'm going to be extra cautious with this patient. I'm going to be a little bit extra vigilant. I'm going to push for some extra blood work. I'm going to push for my doc to see them just a little bit faster than maybe they normally would, because there's something there, and you just can't put your hand on it or your finger on it. But sure enough, the more often you do it, the more often you lean into it, the more often you're right. And so the science, it's, comparing insight versus intuition, and, what are you looking for? Is it pattern recognition? Is it neurotransmitters? Is it experience? Like, it's everything all together. But it's just when you actually lean into it and just go like, what's the worst that could happen if I was extra cautious with the patient?
Hmm.
The patient still gets more attention. Science behind that, even if you're a brand new nurse, you're concerned, maybe you're over concerned, you go to your doc actually comes back and sees your patient. Great, nothing's really all that bad. Just by having the doctor put eyes on that patient still improves patient outcomes. So it's like it's a win-win. So you can still practice your intuition and be wrong, and that's fine. It's going to happen. You're not going to be right all the time, but it's a learning process. And the hardest part is just saying there's something there. Not and just to yourself, and just acknowledging that you're feeling something. The next hardest part is then verbalizing it to somebody else, to be like, I just don't know what's happening, and I want to be super safe and make sure that all the, I's are dotted, T's are crossed, we're not missing anything, and go with that. And so again, nobody's not benefiting from this. It's
Right.
still the patient's getting extra care. You're learning, you're taking critical situations and kind of dissecting them a little bit more. Yes, absolutely, pattern recognition and assessment skills. Like, I can look at somebody across the park and go like, oh, liver, like, just, you're a little jaundiced, and you don't quite know it. Or I'm just kind of looking at you and I'm like, nope, something not right. But it's not up to me, again, especially not in just your public settings, to be like, hey, have you had your liver checked lately? Because, I just have this feeling, because that doesn't go over well. I can tell you, because I've done it one time at work to a family member, and the family member was like, yeah, I've got, whatever. And I'm like, okay, sorry. I just thought I was
Oops.
being helpful. But, it is what it is, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I just have to turn off my stove before apparently we burn the place down. 1 second.
We will be right here. So a lot of what Jen is talking about, and we're talking about the science here. And there is also, I don't want to say a spiritual component, but a lot of people also talk about intuition as just this knowing inside of you, or a connection to universal truth, right? And we know when we're tapped into that universal truth because it sits like truth, it feels like truth inside of us. And so that's just a different way to look at it. I just wanted to fill up the time while you had to walk away, Jen. Um,
Thank you.
that's another way to look at it, is like, does this feel like truth to me? And so if you get
Yeah.
that nagging feeling that Jen's talking about, of like, ooh, something feels off here with this patient, really connect to that for a moment and just, does this feel like truth? Yes, this feels like truth. Okay. Give the patient extra attention. Like Jen saying,
Yeah.
it's not going to hurt. There's no
No.
negative outcome. Like obviously if someone else is about to die, then there's a negative outcome, but you guys are
Fair
getting
enough.
alarmed all over the place and you're going to be giving that patient more
But
attention
but
anyway.
truly,
They're right about
that's
to
probably the
like,
one that's crashing, right? Because
right,
this
right.
is only happening, at least to me. Like maybe it happens once every couple of shifts, maybe once or twice every couple of weeks, when it's that there's just that one, and like you're walking down the hall, you're just coming into shift, and you stop immediately, and you're looking at this patient going like, what is happening here? Like, who's got this patient? What is happening? They look awful, but like, what is happening? Like, I need more information on this. I may not even be their primary nurse. I'm stopping, I'm asking, because they're still in my department.
Yep.
Half the time I'm charge nurse, half the time I'm not. But once you step into charge nurse, you can't quite get out of that role. So it's just like, who needs a hand with this? Like, what is happening? Is there something that needs to be done? Are there medication to be given? Are we just looking to move the patient into a room now that there's an opening? What can I help with this? what's gonna speed this along so that we can put them on a monitor to see what the heck's going on?
Right. Like, what can I do in this situation? So I want to actually keep the secrets in your book secret, or all the stories in your
Okay.
book secret, so that people go get it. Is there a story that didn't quite make the book that you could maybe share about how intuition actually had a really positive impact on a patient that you were working with, Jen?
Yeah. So one that happened a while ago, and just as the book was moving into editing. And so, it's 6 in the morning. I'm leaving at 7 in the morning. It's been a long day. I've been at triage all night. I'm exhausted. I don't even know if we got breaks that night. Things have finally settled down, and a gentleman walks into the ER. And I'm like, oh, okay, like I'm triage. I'll handle this, whatever. It's 6 o'clock. We'll probably sit on him till 7 until the new doc comes in anyways, as long as everything's fine. So get talking to this guy and going through past medical history, and sure enough, he's got pancreatic cancer. And I'm
Oof.
going, wow, you look really good for having pancreatic cancer. And we're kind of talking back and forth. And he's like, yeah, I'm just having a little bit of an uptick in pain, and that's new for me. And I just want to kind of get this taken care of and do that kind of thing. So we go through everything, take his vitals. Vitals are fine. Everything's fine. But it's just like, before I closed the program, I was like, but how are you doing? And it's not usually a question I'm asking at triage, because that's just a way too open-ended
Right.
question for triage. And I already know you're not feeling great, or else you wouldn't be here, kind of thing. So, I'm just going like, hey, like, how are you doing with this? Because pancreatic cancer, typically, it's like a 3-month from diagnosis and you're gone. Kind of scenario. And so
Yes.
I said, this must be pretty new, because like you look really good and everything else. And he goes, oh, it's fairly new. I'm about a month in, and kind of starts going into everything. And I don't know what made me ask, but it's that thought that popped into my head, and it was out of my mouth before I could stop it. And I go like, but like, no, like, how are you really doing? Like, have you got things in place? Have you got, do you know what your celebration of life would look like, or a wake, or whatever? Um, and he goes, actually, yeah. And he went on and he listed all of these things. He's got 2 young kids, and we're kind of talking about this, that, and the other. And I said, like, look, there are actually death cafes where people who work in the industry of death get together and they talk about it. And it's a way to kind of bounce ideas off of each other, kind of bond a little bit, and realize that death is very normal for some of us. So, we need to kind of get around and talk to it, because it's not something you can usually bring to a dining room table. And so it's, okay.
Go ahead. I'll be right here.
And so telling him about the death cafes, I said, they're online. You can go to ones in person if you're comfortable with doing that. And it's not often that people who are in the process of dying are going. But honestly, you could get a lot of really good insight and a lot of great tips on, what to expect and how to cope and how to prepare your family, kind of thing. And I said, speaking of family, like, how's your wife doing? And so I saw the ring on his finger. So I'm like, how's your wife doing with all this? He goes, she's not coping.
Mm.
She refuses to let me talk about dying. She refuses to say anything other than we're going to beat this. And he goes, I don't want to bring her down with the reality that I've already accepted. But it makes it very hard because I do want to talk about it. Like, I do want to have it open and say things to her that, she just can't accept hearing right now. I said, okay. I said, so, some of the things that I've been doing is like I've been writing, like I've got journals for my kids that have been going on since the moment I found out I was pregnant for each one
Aw.
of them. And so it's like, you were loved from minute one. We were so excited. And, this is the day that you kicked the crap out of my side. And I had to like, take your freaking foot out of my ribs because you were just getting in there. And, and the kids think the stories are hilarious now.
Right.
And so I'm like, this is what I've done. And especially with COVID, I've kind of continued it again with this whole story of like leaving a legacy kind of thing. And so he goes, that's actually a really, really good idea. I think I would really like to do that. I said, go for it. Like, this is your ride. You're the one who is in charge of it. And it's unfortunate that your wife's not there to meet you halfway, but there are so many support services that you can look into. And so he goes, okay. I said, and he just says, he's like, I said, oh, are you doing anything? He goes, oh yeah, we've got this like big trans European cruise, like one of these river cruises kind of thing. And he goes, oh, and it's happening in like June or July. And I think this is like February. And I'm like, ooh, you might want to bump that up. He goes, oh, do you think I'll be gone by then? I said, no, not necessarily. But at the same time, I also want you to be well enough to actually enjoy it and be
Right.
there for your kids and make those memories. Like, I don't want you worrying about having to, get off at some random stop being kind of left behind because you've got a medical emergency or you're too weak to continue kind of thing. So, maybe bump it up. Pay the extra money, bump it up, do all the things you got to do because like this is a once in a lifetime trip. And so he goes, yeah, that's good. He goes, okay. And so I'm like, is there anything else I can do for you? He goes, actually, no, this has been just the best thing ever. And I'm like, I'm so glad. Like, thank you. And so I like close the window as he's walking away and I turn around and all my buddies are in the other end of the nursing station. They're all bawling. And I'm like, what I do? They're like, you had another caring, intuitive moment. And so this is what they call it when I go off the deep end and just I start talking and not stopping. And so the joke is it's a caring intuitive moment because I just go with it. And
Oh,
it happens, of course, usually at like 6 a.m. when I'm trying to like gear up to get ready to go and I got to make sure all my people are fluffed and puffed and ready to rock and roll for the next person. And so on the way home, my buddy and I were driving together. I said, this is going to sound like a really strange question, but you know me, I'm already strange, so it's fine. Um, was I talking in my normal voice? She goes, yeah. I'm like, all right. Well, I thought I'd ask. I'm like, why not? Maybe had a different lilt or something to it. I don't know. Because like I've done this enough where people go like, what are you doing? And I'm like, because this is not normally what I do. Usually your typical ER nurse, you're in, you're out, see ya, have a great day, I'll see you later, versus like, how can I help you emotionally? But it's those moments that I always find these stories, and it's like, it completely changes how that person's going to be treated within the ER. And I feel bad that I can't do it for everybody. But a lot of people are a little soul sucking. So I can't do it for everybody. So those that break through and get me into that headspace of like talking without thinking, I'm always fascinated by the results because I'm just like, I'll go completely off script and you never know what we're going to find out because we end up finding out things that again, like completely change your entire idea of what you thought was going on with that patient.
wow. And what a beautiful gift you gave him. And, and what I'm hearing in there is you accepted where it was. You knew the reality of a situation. You also knew that unlike the lawyers, that he's already been getting prepared that the end of his life is probably going to be coming pretty quickly and way
Yeah.
quicker than he expected. So
Yeah.
you aren't dashing hope. You are
No.
meeting reality. I just want to make a distinction for listeners that are like, wait a second, she just
Yeah,
talked
you
about
just talked about hope.
totally different because you're talking about someone who's already been given a fatal prognosis.
Yeah.
So meeting them where they are, allowing them to be in that and helping to support them at the end of life, that's beautiful. That's love.
Yeah.
That's not dashing hope. That's
No.
very different in there. I ironically, I actually know a stage 3 pancreatic cancer survivor. She's 3 years clean.
Good for her. Holy cow.
She
That's
does it through
huge.
cognitive movement, which is a whole other discussion, but
Pick your
and she
brain
is
later.
the epitome of health. She looks healthy. And I met her when she was, I think, within a couple months of finishing chemo. So
Okay.
I've watched her health grow over the
Yeah.
last few years, and she's thriving.
It's
But
insane,
that's
isn't it?
not what usually. And she speaks frankly that she was getting prepared for death, and something inside of her talking about intuition's like, nope,
Yep.
no, this is not going to take me. I'm
Yeah.
going to find what I need to find to beat this and be the odds.
Yeah.
And she did. And she's so diligent
Yeah.
with everything that she does to maintain that health. And
Mhm.
not like to a point where she's rigid and not enjoying life. She's enjoying life more than most people I know. Like it's just this beautiful thing, but it's rare.
Yeah.
You know,
It's
so
damn near unheard of.
it is. And
Yeah.
so in that situation, like if you were to meet her, I'm guessing you would have switched and what are you gonna do?
Yeah. How
How
are
are
you
you
going to
gonna
celebrate?
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Because she's like, well, I'm not gonna die. I'm gonna be the odds. And all right, cool.
And
Someone's
like
gotta be right up to you.
you want to talk about intuition, the patients who flat out look you dead in the eyes and say, "I'm going to die." Holy shit. Yep. Okay, I'm right there with you. And that just amps my, cortisol and my adrenaline straight through the roof because I'm like, the number of times people have said that and are absolutely right, is scary.
Yeah.
They absolutely know what's going on. They absolutely know what's happening, and it's in those moments where it's like a critical situation and you've got no other option other than to go, okay, like, sure, yeah, and try your best to do what you can, and sometimes you take the win and sometimes you have to take the loss because
Yeah.
we're not miracle workers as much as we want to believe so.
No. And miracles can occur, but it's a lot of it is in the mindset of the person. If someone's looking in your eye and saying, I'm gonna die, their mindset isn't
Yeah.
into miracles.
No.
They're ready to go. And
Yeah.
I don't know, death actually doesn't scare me. What can happen to me on this earth, that could be a little frightening sometime, but I don't have
Yeah.
I'm not in any hurry to meet death, just to be clear. But
Oh,
because
no.
I know a lot of people are like, I don't have a fear of death. And then you hear that they've taken their life in 3 or 4 weeks. That's not me, just to be
Yes.
clear. I have no fear of
Okay,
death,
good.
and I also not looking forward to it.
Good.
It can
Glad.
be way out in the future. Way, way,
Yeah.
way out. I got a lot more I want to do before I'm done. Um,
Right.
but
This
that
whole time
mindset.
it's sorry.
No, go ahead,
This
please.
this whole time in the back of my head is like, just make it to be alive for the book release. Just like just in the back, just keep moving, just one step forward, just keep moving, just one more day, just keep moving forward.
There's that hope.
And it's just like, it's there. We're right there. Let's go. Let's go.
Yeah. This has been an awesome conversation. I want to be mindful of time since I try to do
Yeah.
shorter episodes for the business professionals who are listening. So we'll
Love it.
make sure that we have all the links in there. But Jen, if you can just tell people where they can find you, the title of your book. Again, I'm going to put all the links in the show notes, but where can they find you on social and the title of your book? And you already said Amazon, so I'll just say it
Yep.
again.
So you can find me at RX for Growth, so prescriptionforgrowth.com. You can find me TikTok and Instagram at ernurse.jen, JENN. You can find me on LinkedIn, Jennifer Johnson, BSCNRN. Do not come for me. There's a million Jennifer Johnsons. So I had to do that. I'm sorry. I know we all hate it that we all use our like full designations.
Funny.
You can find me pretty well everywhere. I'm Amazon. If you search Jennifer A. Johnson RN, you will find not just my book, but a ton of journals that I've done, again, on grief and death and dying, and nurse wellness, and 100 Shifts journal about just kind of keeping track of your own growth as a nurse as you grow, and being able to kind of bounce back from those really tough days a little bit easier.
Awesome. Thank you. So, is there one message that you would want to leave a nurse with who is just feeling the demands of your career? He or she is like thinking of tapping out and leaving the profession and doing something else. What would you want to say to that nurse who's listening to this right now, Jen?
You're not alone. You're absolutely not alone. And if you need to step away or step away permanently, trust your gut. You know what you need. Nursing will always be there. There will always be shifts to fill. There will always be a job to go to. There will always be work. Do not worry about stressing out your colleagues, about worrying about if there's a job to go back to. There's a million jobs. Take care of yourself for once. We're the worst patients, so please just take care of yourself. And, they would post your job posting before they'd post your obit.
Oh, ow.
Yeah.
Damn. Oh, that last one. Oh, that had a hook in it, Jen. Oof, good one. Yeah, walk away. Don't go 6 feet under. Walk away if you are at that point, please.
Yeah.
And yeah, you can be per diem. You can take breaks. You can go do something else.
There's so much work that, just if it's there and you want to do it, great. If not, take some time, reflect. There's a million different jobs for nurses that doesn't require you being at the bedside and doing shift work.
Love that. Thank you. That's really great advice. And thank you for joining me today, Jen. It's been great to get to know you, hear about your book, and I'm excited to see it hit the shelves. And you guys can go out to Amazon now and you can pre-order. And thank you, as always, to everybody who is listening. I know you have a lot of choices of what to listen to on the internet, and I really appreciate you taking your time and tuning in to my show. So I hope you're going to come back and join me again next week. Until then, please be well.
Thank you for joining us today. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend and leave a 5-star review, which helps grow the podcast and reach others just like you. While you're at it, connect with Katie on social media. You can find her on LinkedIn, TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram as @CoachKTDubs. That's CoachKTDubs. This has been The Catapult Effect with Katie Wrigley. Thanks for listening.